Coyotiv is a next generation remote software engineering education that is designed to make you a first-class software engineer from scratch in 2020 and beyond. That means it's an online school of software engineering and not a bootcamp training where we talk about a lot of different subjects based on making you a software engineer ready for your first software engineering job for web application development. We talk about object-oriented programming, UML diagrams, functional programming, event-driven architectures, design patterns, component-based front-end development with Vue.js, single-page applications, server-side rendering, HTML5 and CSS3 best practices. We talk about Node.js and REST APIs and layered architecture. We talk about authentication, external API processing, and MongoDB and ORMs and aggregation and lean product development and continuous integration and so on and so forth. Our goal is to make you ready for the industry in 9 weeks of time. And obviously, this is a school of software engineering that prepares you for the real world scenarios. So these are not the only topics that we're going to discuss. What we do is we also have mentorship sessions, one-on-one mentorship and group mentorship sessions, and additional trainings that include sessions for career building, CV authoring, interviewing skills, mock interviews, public speaking, and more. So we believe that teaching you only the technical skills required to succeed in the industry is not enough. So what we do is we also try to prepare you for every scenario out there, starting from your interviewing, because in order to get a job, you have to pass the interviews. That's why we're doing this event today, because we want to support you with the strategies you need to take in order to pass your interviews. And today, I have amazing guests with me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then move over to the webinar. And today, I have great guests with me, Füsun, Wehrmann, and Steve Winter. And we're going to be discussing the best practices a junior candidate can take in interviewing for software engineering roles. So without further ado, I'm going to invite first Füsun to share a little bit more about herself, and then Steve, and then we're going to start the discussion. Hello, Füsun. How are you doing?
Hi, Armagan. Good to see you.
You as well.
Thanks for inviting me to this meeting. I'm excited to be in such a setup for the first time. And let me introduce shortly myself. I've been working in the IT industry for over 22 years. I calculated 5 minutes ago, and around 12 years of this time was very hands-on, even in leadership roles, coding and making on call, and very close to the field. And the last 10 years were a mixture of engineering leadership and rolling with the teams, but not being super active in the code base. I work for biggish companies, mostly SAPs, Microsofts, Vodafones, and recently I've been working for Wayfair for the last 1 year in supply chain engineering.
That's amazing. And if you allow me to say a couple of words about yourself, we worked closely, not side by side, but closely with Füsun at Wayfair. And I was honored to see her a beacon of light in engineering management and directorship. And I was very happy for everything she did for her teams. And we're going to be talking about those topics, but I like spoilers a little bit. So, for equity and for diversity. And I was very honored when you accepted our invite. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Emma.
All right. Steve is our next guest.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm really pleased to be asked to jump on this webinar and guest on it.
Welcome.
I've been in tech recruitment for about 10 years now, working for a mixture of large and small organizations, all tech businesses. The past 4 years, I've been involved in a business called Seed, and actually worked through Seed on site with some really interesting, cool tech organizations, companies like Klarna, Wayfair I worked with a little bit, hence how I know you both, Farm Drop in the UK, and I'm now more recently working with a really interesting tech startup in Berlin called Sender, who sit within the supply chain, logistics and road freight sectors. Been lucky enough in my time to be responsible for scaling engineering teams from 0 to 200 plus engineers, which was such a fantastic thing to do. And yeah, recruitment, love what I do. It's a great job and something that I'm really passionate about. So thanks for having me.
Oh, we're very honored to have you as well. And again, maybe a couple of words on from my side. So, you know, I'm an engineering manager at heart, and that's what I do. But we have to work with talent acquisition managers all the time to find the best talent. And, you know, it's very, very important to find someone that can truly understand what you're looking for and that can truly represent the company just as you imagine. And Steve was one of those people, and I was very lucky to work with him, even though for a short while. And I think we did great in that time frame to find the people that we needed. So when we had this idea to do a webinar about interviewing, I thought, you know, these two people are the best that I know in the field for hiring and, you know, for recruiting. And that's why we should do this. So we're going to jump on the discussion right now, but we have a Q&A section open for our participants. So feel free to ask any questions. We're going to have about 15 minutes at the end to discuss those questions. And hopefully, you know, we're going to be able to answer a lot of your questions in our discussion anyway. We're really prepared. We have a lot of content. So I'd like to start with the first topic that we have in mind, and that's about a typical interview process. So what should a candidate expect to go through in interviews? I know this depends a lot on the company, but what is a kind of a typical process of stages and expectations?
Happy to jump in and explain from my experience. So I typically have enjoyed working with startup businesses, SME type businesses. And I guess the first stage would always involve a conversation with somebody like myself. So a recruiter or a talent acquisition partner or manager. That's a common term now in businesses. This acts as a first filter for the company, and also really it's an opportunity for the recruiter to qualify the candidate in line with what their hiring manager really needs in that team. So I guess you could say I'm a gatekeeper to an extent.
Yeah, so you're like the boss at the end of the level one. And
if you're related to gaming, yes, I'd say so.
And we first have to pass you in order to move on with the later levels.
Yeah, I think so. That's a very good analogy, I'd say. But I guess once you get past the first boss, then what the real gist of the interview process starts from there, I'd say. And normally, so in my experience at the moment, working for Sender, how we do things is I would move a candidate straight on to a first interview with an engineering manager. That's an opportunity for that manager to assess your technical capability and knowledge, where you are with your understanding and learning at the moment. They might have some predefined technical questions around frameworks you've been learning, tools you've been learning, and that will form the basis of the first conversation. If that goes well, and of course, bear in mind, if this goes well for both parties, if the candidate is happy as well, of course, remember you should be assessing the company as much as the company's assessing you. Then what we would do at Sender is we would move forward to a coding challenge. And this can typically in different companies, it could form the basis of sort of something online, which you would do at home through a platform. They would sort of propose a challenge, and you would write some lines of code to try to solve that. That would be reviewed by somebody in the team. And if that looks to the standard what we would hope, we would then set up a second interview. And this is normally with maybe 1 or 2 engineers from the team that we're going to be looking to potentially hire into. Reason we want to do it with that team is it's a great opportunity for those engineers to really sell a little bit about the business, about why they enjoy working in that team. But also what we can do is we can use the basis of that code challenge that you've done as a bit of a bit of a skeleton to the interview, and the interviews can then ask questions. How did you approach this? And it's an opportunity for you to sort of talk through how you did that. That should form a really nice two-way conversation, and it should give the interviewers enough knowledge, especially bear in mind that we're hiring for juniors here, that does this person have enough experience or enough understanding to come in and add some value, but also have they got the potential to grow within our organization. So that would be sort of the second interview. And the final part, again, if everything goes okay, would typically be a non-technical interview. So something you would normally sit down with somebody from technical leadership. In our case, it might be our CTO, might be one of our engineering directors, and they would steer a conversation around behaviors and competencies, and really get to understand you as a person. Will this individual fit into the philosophy of our company? Do they have similar values? Have they got the likability factor? That's a big thing for myself. I always think in any interview, what I see is an interviewer will be looking to assess, of course, on technical knowledge and experience, but I think just as importantly, they're looking for that likability factor. I've seen people, so I used to work at a business called Klarna, and we did some really interesting stuff. We would attract some really world-class engineers to come and talk to us. But I've seen situations where these brilliant engineers might come into an interview, but they didn't have that likability factor. And ultimately, they didn't get a job offer. And that's because what an interviewer is sometimes looking for is, can I sit in a room with this person for 8 or 9 hours a day? Would I want to spend all that time with them? And sometimes you have to ask yourself that as an interviewer, is this person just a really nice person? Would I get along with them? So I guess that for me is a bit of a typical interview process that I've seen in my
last
time.
part a little bit tricky. How would you, maybe Füsun would like to jump in here, how would you differentiate between a person that would do great in a team and, someone that would not?
That's a good question. I totally understand where that likability factor comes from, and especially in smaller setups, it's more of it's sort of more of a cultural value. There's a set of people that you will work with, maybe 20, 30 people company, and you go into a team of 5. So these people have certain behaviors, certain culture, and they would look for like harmony factor. Can we gel with this person? And there's nothing wrong around that. Can we connect with that person? Where it gets really tricky is, the social and unconscious cultural biases we have. If that person is a woman, or if that person is much older than you think. Imagine you are a junior programmer with 50 years of age. So are you going to treat that person? Are you going to like that person just as any person you would like, with 20, 25 years of age? And minorities in general, peoples we might not be used to work with. So I I would say this likability factor is something that should be used very delicately. And yeah, also as a candidate, you should look at the values and the, you know, atmosphere in the team and ask yourself, is this a team, is this an atmosphere I want to work in? And one thing I also think is a good practice is not to be in a room with 5 interviewers, 3 interviewers. It's always a better practice to have one-to-one conversations, and maybe at the very end, if necessary, you know, just to have a chat with the team or with a smaller group maybe, but your interview process where your competencies, where your fit is assessed should go one-to-one and ending in a panel, so you get a fair chance of being assessed from different perspectives. That also applies to so-called likability or cultural fit aspect.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So when is a junior candidate ready to apply for jobs? Like, should they wait for 3 years and work on them, on their skills, or should they right away start applying to jobs? Where's the fine point where they start applying to jobs? For
me, I would say if they're on a course like your one, I would say I'd advise probably let's get to sort of maybe 3/4 of the way through that course. Let's understand what it is you're really enjoying, what direction you might want to go in. Make sure you have a bit of an understanding, and I think they get that from your course, in what they could move on to do in the real world. So I would say get through the majority of the course, talk to your teachers and the people that are around you who are sort of advising, and then identify sort of a set of companies, industries that might interest you, and then have a look around what they can offer, what the products are they're working on, and really build a bit of a short list and start actively going out and looking for some job adverts. You could maybe look on LinkedIn, maybe you want to go on Stack Overflow Careers, Glassdoor maybe. Even if you have that short list of companies, go direct to their website. They'll always have a careers page. That'll give you some really cool insights into what it's like working there. They could have videos, they could have blogs, different interviews with people who've been there. Have a look, see what you think would fit to your personality and your ambition, and then apply. No harm in applying. Worst case scenario is you don't get interviewed and you don't get the job, but no harm in applying.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about that a lot as well. But I want to ask Füsun, like from a technical standpoint, when should a candidate start applying for jobs? You know, how much confidence should they feel, or how much skills should they have? When should they start applying for a job from an only purely technical point of view?
That's a good question, Arman. So if you come from a technical education, you know, if you go study computer science or whatnot after 4 years, you know, you feel like you've done so much, you should be able to apply. But there is also a lot of talent out there using, you know, channels like you, opportunities like yours. And then the question is, when am I ready? I think number one thing is, what do you feel about it? It's like learning to bike, you know, somebody is giving you guidance, giving you a bike, maybe some, you know, hold you a little bit here and there. But the question is, do you actually enjoy riding the bike? And do you feel like, you know, do you feel the urge to get on the bike? And that also goes with interest, you know. So coding, software engineering, of course, professional interests and money and all that. But at the end of the day, the success in this field is a lot about, you know, interest and having the urge to create a solution. So if you feel like you can sit down and create something that you like, solving a problem or not solving a problem, doing something you enjoy, I think that's a pretty good start for saying, okay, that's something I like doing and I could be doing this contributing to something and learning from other people, then it's a good point to start. And it's a matter of, okay, what is the hygiene level threshold for me to get into that team? And at the end of the day, it will be always about selecting the people and the technical environment you will be absorbing. So one advice from me, try not to go big companies where there is old legacy systems and, you know, where you might struggle, which is the right way to go. They normally have 5 different systems, some of them very modern, some of them very old. And as a junior, you might land in good places and bad places. So I think all that plays a role.
Yeah. Well, I agree that it might be very difficult for a junior, right? In a legacy system to even know where to start looking for things. Okay, but Füsun, then what are the top 3 things you look for in a call? Maybe not the technical call, but you know, the first introduction call you have with a junior engineer, the first hiring manager call. What are the 3 things that you look for there?
So sometimes I take junior calls every once in a while. And the first thing I look is potential. And potential is a buzzword, but what is it actually? So first of all, every one of us brings some kind of technical analytical background from school, from gymnasium, from maybe university, from courses and programs like this. And then understanding where does that person come from, what is the background, and then plus what is there in this person. Can I see his way of thinking? Can I see his enthusiasm or her enthusiasm? And a lot of him and his in this call, including me, so that's good. Can I see this person enthusiasm and interest, and does it give me the signals and evidence this person with the background and the personal potential come into my organization and be successful. And today, talent drives the company, right? We are not like selecting and picking people. We are really looking at, can we make these people successful? As engineering managers, we are not interested in, you know, judging people. We are interested in getting people we can make successful. Do I have the tools and the environment to make these people shine? Our number one goal is, how do I get a junior to a professional level in 1 year? That's my personal success criteria for the engineering teams.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that's one thing. The second thing is
okay, that was on the first.
Yeah, that was the first. Sorry. So, but that's the most important one. That's A&O. I think that's half of the call. The second thing is systems thinking. So I think it's the number one skill you develop from being junior to the professional level. Can you look at the problem in a holistic way? Are you getting lost in the details, or can you, you know, connect the dots, bring bits and pieces together and use your skills to approach that problem? And the last thing is the cultural fit, knowing yourself, your team, your company. Do you think it's a good relationship? Do you think that will be something that would be beneficial for both parts? Yeah,
makes sense.
That would be the
Steve, you were saying?
I was just going to add to what was said already there. I think enthusiasm for me as a recruiter on that initial call before we would go to the hiring manager call or engineering manager call, enthusiasm goes a long way when you're looking at hiring juniors. Hiring a junior, you're not going to get the finished article. Even hiring a senior, you're not going to get the finished article. But most junior roles, it goes without saying that they're going to require additional training and onboarding over the next 6 to 12 months of employment. So if you can show that you're enthusiastic about what you've learned in your studies and at home, on if you're maybe working on pet projects or something like this, then that goes a long way putting the employer at ease that this is somebody who's passionate and enthusiastic about learning, and there's going to be a lot of learning in this job, so we want somebody who embraces that learning. So that's normally a big tick in the box for me. And then alluding a little bit more on the social skills side. So I think sometimes candidates can really focus, maybe overly focus on the tech and the individual job itself, but pretty much every software engineer I know works in teams. So I think what we need to be doing is assessing
Hopefully,
your
right? They were
social skills, to make sure that you can work in a collaborative way. Social skills don't mean you're going to be the life and soul of the party or you're the most extroverted person in the room. We're not looking for that. What I mean is, are you the type of person who is self-aware? Can you consider and discuss feedback with your peers? Can you communicate your ideas clearly? You'll be doing all this on a daily basis with your team when you're in daily stand-ups, sprints, retrospectives, etc. So being able to demonstrate that in the early stages of a process is super useful.
Makes a ton of sense. We had a comment from the audience, and feel free to use the chat. You can send a message to all panelists that we can see, or all the attendees. So feel free to use the chat to converse as well. And if you have any comments, you can leave there. If you have any questions, we have a separate Q&A section that we're gonna answer at the end. But there was a very interesting sort of a comment and a question, and especially related to this question, like, what questions should I not ask the recruiters to not frighten them with my ambitions? And I think you really talked about that point a little bit. It's not about the hard skills or the actual job itself, but we're trying to see whether you are a person who can learn and who can receive feedback, maybe. So, like, is there anything that you'd say somebody shouldn't ask you in an interview?
I guess for me, no question is a bad question, especially when you're new to the industry. What I would say is, maybe if we flip it over and talk about what great questions are, which would make you stand out from the crowd. For me, I think it's important that you ask and get an understanding what success would look like for you coming into that role. You need something to measure yourself against. We do this in all forms of life, in any job. So what would a first 30 days, a first 60 days, a first 90 days look like for me? How can I prepare for that? Another great question I like to hear is when people tell me, why did you join this business? What is it that makes you get out of bed every morning to come and do the work you do at this business? And for me, that's a really interesting question, because it means that that candidate is seriously thinking about, can I picture myself in this organization? Is it something that I'm gonna, in 6, 12, 2 years time, whatever it might be, am I still gonna have that passion to get out of bed and go in there and make a difference? And for me, questions like this really sort of demonstrate you're serious about your future and what you want to achieve in it, and in your path that you want to go down. So I hope that maybe answers it loosely, but I don't know if anybody else has got other thoughts there.
I can answer that. That resonates with me. I have experience with, candidates asking a lot of questions, and sometimes, being in a weird situation with the recruiter. So ultimately with juniors, it's something to remember. And mind you, I learned it too late in my career. Asking questions is great, but you need to be precise. You need to be genuine, not for the sake of asking questions. And pick your top 3 questions. If you have a great partner, if you have the time, maybe it will be 5. So as a, framework. And remember, recruiters are very knowledgeable in their domain, how that company works, and even some of the technical details. But these are not the people responsible for the, implementation and strategy and all that. They don't know the day-to-day tactical operational things going on. Ask your technical questions to the technical person. Ask organizational questions, maybe to recruiters for some, you know, questions, but maybe you will just need to ask it to a manager, to the CTO. So match your questions to the audience well.
Yeah. So what are, you know, one or two questions for you, Füsun, that a candidate should ask in an interview?
So a junior person is expected to be eager to learn and have potential. So I would like to also see signs of that. Questions that goes, you know, in the direction of what can I learn here? What technology do you have? What do you offer me? What kind of a growth path do I have here? And what are the options I have for growth? You know, tech is not tech and development is not development. So if you have a preference to go in front end or back end or SRE, so ask these questions and see if that manager can give answers in that direction. And also if there is a burning concern for you personally, you know, all of us have different urgencies, and you know, we find different things important. You know, maybe you are a parent and you want, first thing on your agenda is work-life balance. So ask the questions that they really matter, really matter to you, and have that contract. And also give the signals of your eagerness to learn, and you know, that you are opinionated about your own career.
So speaking of career and technology, how important are tech skills for a junior when they're, you know, when they want to start their first job? And when you're hiring a junior engineer, how important really are the tech skills? I know it's a tricky question to ask an engineering manager.
Yes, of course there's important. I mean, the work is about tech, right? So, but again, what we want to see is their potential. And we want to see your ability, your tendency to work on solutions in an analytical manner. At the end of the day, the things you learn in programs like this or at computer science school, wherever, it's just a tool set. And it's about given a problem, given a challenge, you are given a set of Lego blocks. You know, you give them green Lego blocks, somebody else with them, blue Lego blocks. How do you attempt to solve this problem? How do you generate the solution alternatives? And can you elaborate on these alternatives? And from there, again, I would look in the context. Is it somebody who has had, you know, a different deep technical education? Is it somebody who has gotten into recently but got very excited and want to come into the commercial world? Depending on the context, how long they have done what, I would make an assessment of this person potential and eagerness to learn. And that will be the tech skill per se. Nobody would look if, you know, I would never mind if you don't know how to use a standard library in C, or, you know, if your framework skills are, you know, the latest and greatest. That really does not matter, should not matter.
Okay, maybe the next topic that I want to talk about is rejections. Because I know this is going to be a path of a lot of rejections. And since you stop looking for a job when you accept a job, you're going to be rejected several times and then you land a job. So how can a candidate handle rejections, and what does a rejection actually mean for a candidate?
Happy to go ahead with this one. I think it's safe to say that everybody has been rejected in their life. The world's best engineers have been rejected for jobs in the past. So, of course, rejection never feels good when it happens. But don't read too much into it or take it personally. Sometimes there's many reasons beyond your control why you've been rejected for a position. Maybe there's just a limited amount of positions to fill. Maybe the role has gone on hold. But one bit of advice I would give is, if you are rejected, then follow up with a quick email or maybe a LinkedIn message. Thank the interviewers for their time. I think that goes a long way. And if you can, ask for any additional information, any real honest, transparent feedback that you can get is gold dust. Because what I'd say, if there's a company who will reject you, but they will maybe gloss over some of the reasons why that is, I think if you can sort of get the real feedback through, this is the stuff that you're going to learn from and going to help you improve your performance in a different interview. So try and strive to get that if you can, but also don't be scared if you get rejected. Don't be scared to try that company again in the future. You might have been rejected for reasons beyond your performance or your abilities at that time. You could apply in 6, 12 months time, 24 months time, whatever it might be. You might have improved by then, but also the company might be in a position where you are actually an ideal fit at that time. Sometimes it's just about timing, and it's not about you're right or wrong for the role. It's purely a timing thing.
Yeah. I would say the same. It's rarely personal. It's rarely only about you or what you can or cannot do. Behind the scenes in the company, there are so many considerations, how the company is going to grow and the dynamics of a team. I'll give you an example. Sometimes I have an opening on the team and I'm looking forward to having some juniors, but all of a sudden I lose somebody from that team. And with that, my coaching capabilities goes away. So in that moment, I might decide to put that position on hold for junior candidates because I cannot really do justice taking them in and coaching them. So there are thousands of things going on, especially in bigger companies. And just remember, it's rarely only about you. It's a context. It's a context thing. And these contexts can change within quarters in companies. So rule of thumb, if you applied somewhere and got rejected, but you're excited about the product or the people you met, after a quarter is a good time. Beginning of year, when people get the budgets, so to say, is a good time to go and, have a conversation with them again.
I think this is a great time where we talk about money that you mentioned, budget. This is a theme that I'm also seeing in the questions that are coming up. A couple of people already asked about negotiating salaries for juniors, salaries and time flexibilities. And it's not only negotiation, but some people would be moving from abroad. So maybe they're not accustomed to the local market rates. So how should they respond when a company or interviewer asks for their salary expectations, and how can they negotiate?
I guess from a recruitment point of view, if you're asked, if you're in a different country and you plan on moving to a country, say you're going to come and move to Berlin, then being asked the question outright, what salary are you after, straight away on a call is not really productive. There's a lot of factors and it's all relative. You could be earning this amount in this country and you come to this country and it feels like I'm taking a massive pay cut. But actually, when you work out the taxes and the cost of living and the price of a beer and the price of a meal and everything that you spend on a monthly basis, then actually you could be in a better situation in this new country than you actually expected. So there's a brilliant tool that I've used for many years now called Numbeo, Numbeo. Great tool to compare city for city, cost of living against cost of living. Have a look at that. But also from a salary perspective, if you want to think, is that a fair salary? If I've been offered a job, is this a fair salary?
How do you know if it's a fair salary or not?
So I think there are certain tools on the market. Glassdoor is a very interesting tool. People are normally more than willing to put on what an engineer might earn at a certain level. But also benefit of that is you get some reviews about what it's like working there as well. Pay scale is another one to look at. But what I would say is you need to understand what's important for you. Don't think too much about sort of in the short term. So you could go to a big enterprise business, and as we mentioned earlier, their systems may be legacy, and chances are you could get paid quite a good salary. But actually, do you really want to be working on legacy systems for the first 2 years of your career? Or would you rather join that really hip and happening cool tech startup that is working with the latest ecosystems and the coolest tools, and they're building some really cool sort of product? Surely 2 years there is going to be more beneficial. Yes, they probably don't have the budget to pay you what the enterprise would, but think of it longer term. Chances are you will progress and you will move on in your career, and you will then warrant the salaries that your new relevant experience justifies a little bit later on. So think of it that way. Of course, we all have bills to pay and personal situations. Some people have families. Yeah. So you have to factor in, I guess, find a balance, what works for you from that perspective.
So, Füsun, how would you negotiate a salary?
So I haven't negotiated, but personally for me or for the candidate, which from
for
the
you.
side, for
if you were a junior, how would you negotiate a salary?
Oh, it's been long years ago, but so if I was a junior, I think doing your homework is important. Doing your homework about a company, you know, how are they? Did they get a funding? How many people are working? You know, is there anything you can find on the net about their salaries and whatnot? I think if you spend a day, you get a solid understanding of a city, country, and, you know, what the balances are. And from there, I think you can develop an understanding of what you might expect. Even better is if you know people in that country, if you can contact the people who are in that industry working. You know, there are also several platforms, even at Glassdoor, you can approach people and ask questions. So try to use all these information sources to get signals about what sounds about right and make an assessment of your personal situation. So if you ask me how I negotiate, so as a woman and as a foreigner in Germany, it took me like 4 or 5 years to get better at this. I wasn't taken advantage of, luckily, you know, looking back, people really did, treated me fairly. So when you are at the end of a pipeline, even as a junior, you will have a gut feeling. You will have a gut feeling of how badly they want to have you, or you are just in a group of candidates, one of the considerations. Don't fly too high. You know, this anchoring effect exists. Some people are, you know, experienced with juniors and, you know, you just fly high and they say, hey, you know, not so high, let's have a meaningful conversation. Some people will literally ditch you out of the process. So it's important to be mindful about that. It's not a gambling game either. One thing you can use, you know, let's say you are coming from another country outside of Europe, you don't know the city, you haven't done your homework. You can say, I'm going to come back later with this answer. I don't have enough information, enough data. Is there anything you can tell me about? Can you support my relocation? Can you support my accommodation in the first month? So you can buy time and get more information about the additional ways of support the company gives you. But ultimately, it's really doing your homework and have a sense of what might be okay for you. So if I were, you know, the people in this group, you know, should ask you, for example, or Steve. I think you guys are great references for having a feeling.
Yeah. Definitely. Just adding to that point, don't be scared to sort of be honest with the recruiter who is looking after you at that company, because at the end of the day, a recruiter's job is to hire people. A recruiter looks good if they sort of hire to a hiring plan. That's what they're targeted on. Of course, they need to be very careful about who they put in, because people who sort of leave the business after a short period of time does not look favourable on them. But what I would say is have a private, honest conversation with that recruiter and say, look, I've tried to do research. I really need a bit of guidance on this. Can you help me? What would you say is a fair sort of salary for somebody of my experience? And that recruiter is probably going to be in a really good position to give some real solid advice. And the more open and honest you are with that recruiter, the more you will build rapport with them, and the more they will sort of really sort of look after you and help you through that process, which goes a long way as well. Don't alienate the recruiter. Don't think of them as that gatekeeper that I just want to get past him. I'm past him now, so I'm not going to bother talking to him again. We're all people, and we all want the right things, and we all just want to do a good job for everybody involved. So and
I think in my experience, a recruiter or a talent acquisition specialist wants the candidate to succeed.
Exactly.
So I have seen from firsthand many times recruiting managers or like talent acquisition specialists taking up sides with the candidate instead of with the company, and trying to find a good balance of a salary negotiation point for the candidate, because they want the candidate to succeed. In the end, it's best for everybody if the candidate lands the job. That means it's less work for everybody. And that's why I've seen people, when I was interviewing for positions, when I was applying to companies, I usually get the recruiters or talent acquisition specialists to help me with salary negotiations, because they know the budget, right? You can talk them into revealing the budget, and then you can go with that. I have done this quite a number of times, and it usually works. But we have about 10 minutes left. So there is a huge topic that I want to address, and that is diversity and equity in the workplace, in the hiring process. And we have received a couple of questions on this front as well. A question is, how could we ask a company about their diversity policies? And coupled with that, how can we understand if a company is a safe place to work at? And especially for underrepresented groups or people coming from underrepresented groups. How would a candidate succeed here in finding a perfect fit from a diversity point of view? There's also, before I give the microphone back to you, maybe there's another question from our community. And it is about advice for people coming back to the industry after a parenting gap. So one person from our audience says, I get married after my studies. My kids are grown now and I want to work again. But I feel that employers don't trust a mother. So what is the best advice that you can give? And I think Füsun, you'd be the person to talk about this when they want to start their career as a junior again.
I mean, if you are a mother, father, if you are gay, or if you are 50 years old, that should all not matter. Truth is, especially in the middle and mid-sized companies, you will face such kind of bias, because international bigger companies, in my experience, they have built a little bit, stronger muscles. They invest in there a little bit heavier. There are exceptions to this in the industry, startups and middle-sized companies also being very sensitive about that. So here and there, you will see these biases, differences. Germany is not the worst of these countries, but it exists. So the question about being a mother, first of all, you don't have to tell anyone if you're married or if you have kids. Don't do that. Don't answer those questions. Don't disclose yourself. Keep private things to yourself. It's not relevant for your job. It's your business. Sometimes they see the gap in your career. And there. So you have two options. If it's like a year, you can say, hey, sabbatical, and I need it. Even white lights are okay. If it's going to be a situation where you think just because of being a bundler, it's going to be a disadvantage to you, my genuine advice is just tell them something. It's your personal time and it's none of their business. And it was, it's very old fashioned to think, oh, that person has a year of gap and 2 years hasn't worked. That's so old fashioned. And if you are in such interview in that company, if possible, run away from that company. So it's about you. It's about what you want right now, here, today. And you are there ready for discussion. You show your skills. You go into the conversations. They should be forward looking. They should be looking at you with why not why shall we hire you. So look for companies with that mindset. How do you ask about diversity? Well, to be honest, if you're a senior candidate, if you have a little bit leverage, you can go deep with this. As a junior, that's a trade-off. So how much does it matter to you? As a woman, I would say if it's a 50-person company and only the receptionist is a woman, that's a decision you need to make. And that's a question you can ask. And maybe that's your social responsibility to ask the question. Chances are in IT, people are more open and flexible about it. And sometimes they just don't know how to find diverse people, but they are not actually against diverse people. But when they get you, it might be that there will be an adjustment period to get used to you. Give an example from myself. I came from Turkey here, and I was a systems administrator. I was an ops girl, and that's not heard of in Germany still today. And I work with these, all male guys as the only women, long years, and they all had their, typical Birkenstock shoes and their, male conversations. And after 3 to 6 months, something clicked and something changed. So it depends on you, what you are willing to take on. But I think you can get the signals from the environment. Look at the names in LinkedIn, which people are working there. Look at the picture. Unfortunately, you cannot see gender, but I think you have a pretty good idea about, in Germany, if 70% is German names, the question about language should not matter. But I worked in companies where there were clusters of German groups where you easily got alienated. Everything, if you're not in Scrum meeting, everybody was speaking German, that wasn't cool. So I think it's about keeping your sensors open.
Mm-hmm. Just adding to that, from my experience, I've worked in businesses where we might have, some businesses have had 60 to 70 different nationalities within the organization. For me, that's really cool because it's like a huge melting pot of ideas, people from different sort of diverse groups coming together. And it's a really great thing. And I think sort of from a hiring, what you can do if you're part of a hiring team. So if you're an interviewer, if you're a recruiter, there's certain elements you can sort of put in place to help eliminate maybe unconscious bias, not just sort of bias deliberate. Things I know, certainly something that we do at Sender is anybody who submits a code challenge, we get that reviewed without sort of revealing the name of who submitted, the gender, the nationality. It immediately puts everybody on a level playing field, which I think is what we all strive to have. Also, if you're in a recruitment process, just be wary of, like, if you're coming in for an interview, is the people that you see are they of different sort of minority groups? Is it all just one set of people? That'll give you clues. The interviewing panel as well. Is it diverse? The way they sort of talk and present themselves, that might give clues as well as to sort of how they approach and think about certain topics that could come up in this sort of field of thinking here. And I know many companies actually go through unconscious bias training with their interviewers and their managers. I think this is a great thing to promote in organizations. It helps eliminate those little subtle things that you don't realize you're doing. And it gives everybody a fair opportunity to land a position within that organization. So little things as a candidate you can do to spot these things and then decide, is this the place for me, or no, I don't think I could fit in here.
Okay. Füsun, maybe this next one could be for you. How do you sustain a diverse team when you're hiring? What do you do to have a team of people from all different backgrounds, and how do you sustain equity in your teams?
Yeah, so I'm working in a fishbowl, right? I work in a very big company, so the culture and the ways of working has a direct influence on my team and diversity. But at the end of the day, my experience is, given all that context, diverse teams are more successful hiring more diverse people. It's like a chicken and egg problem. So in my old company, where I had several teams, everybody was using the same recruiters, everybody was using the same pipelines, all things equal. Some teams were significantly more diverse and getting more and more different background people than the others. And I think there is a strong learning point in there. That's why the beginning of a team is very important. The people, if you are launching a new thing from scratch, a new team, then invest in this, invest in the time, invest in getting the diverse candidates into the pipeline. With the time pressure we have, with the, quick, get people in, it's so easy to say, okay, we want one developer and we have 60 males in the pipeline. Yeah, let's do it. So invest in extra time to get that candidates and make these extra loops. And with small changes, 1 or 2 people and unconscious bias trainings, small increments lead to more and more diverse teams. That's so getting people in. The most difficult thing is keeping people inside. You can tell them the great diversity stories, make YouTube videos and whatnot, and you have a great branding. And when you land in the company, are you hitting a glass ceiling or not? And is it, do people keep their promises? So my job is to keep promises. My job is to give my people the best environment I possibly can and push my company to do better. And that's not like, hoorah, yay, we like diversity and we have 50 nationalities and we are Czech. I don't think so. So numbers, I'm an engineer, numbers matter. First of all, yeah, are we paying people equally? In small companies, it's a little bit harder to measure because of statistical relevance, but in a company like Wayfair, we have, several hundreds here and worldwide thousands. So I want to see where the minorities fit in average and in compared to median, and they cannot be, not all of them can be at or under average or median. They should be also over. I have to see that, and I want to make sure that they are not, taken advantage of or in this disadvantage situation. Second is not money. Am I making progress in my career? And for me, the measurement is rate of promotion. Measure the rate of promotion for these minorities, for levels. On average, it takes a male, white, German 2 years to get to the other level, from junior to professional. And how about with the others? And I think if you can put these numbers in front of people, that has a real effect. Many companies don't have this, but at least the genuine interest and attempt to get there is what matters.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your insights. And one thing that I can add for this, at least in Germany, there is a law that says you can ask for the salary details of a colleague, and the company cannot pay you differently. So you can ask the management, how much is this person making? And the company has to tell you if that person is doing the same job as you, so that you can, make sure that there is not a gap of salaries, or even if there are any, that the company has to have a very good reason for that. I think this is how the government is trying to keep the companies in check, in balance. We are over time. It's been an entire hour. This was lovely to chat to you. And we have a couple of questions still. And we have still a quite number of people watching. And if you are okay going on for another 10 minutes or so, I would like to address some of the other questions that have come up. Would that be okay for you?
Sure.
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you. Then we can now move on to all the questions that we received. One is about certificates and courses done online, like Udemy, Coursera, you name what, or self-study. Are they really worth to mention in the resume, or do you even care for certificates and those courses? What do you look for?
For senior positions, I wouldn't. If somebody comes like architect, engineering manager, senior developer, I expect those people to deliver and to give clear answers to certain questions, demonstrate competencies right away. And their past is what brought them to that situation. So for juniors, it's a different story. Everything you put on your CV, on your story, is something that might add credibility to what you say. So not too many things, and not, every single course and every book you read. It also shows your, it's also a representation of how you approach it and how you understand this, which references do you choose to put on your CV?
Okay. For you, Steve, when you look at the CV, do you differentiate between college education and these certificates and other courses? Or if you compare, how important are they?
Honest opinion. So I think when you look how we deliver software in e-commerce in the outside world, I studied computer science. I even did some, math major. Have I used any of it in all my career? 5% maybe, and that in the first 5 years maybe, because I was, I looked for opportunities to use it. So today, to be a good developer, you don't really need that education, but what computer science education gives you is some basics, like, data structures, architectures, and using analytical thinking and breaking complex problems into digestible, actionable items. And either you get it from university, from technical education, or you have to get it somewhere else. That could be the company you are working in, or that could be your personal, effort into that. But definitely I would ask questions differently, and, poking into different areas, especially algorithms and data structures. If that person is not from a computer science degree, I would see how deep can I go with that person.
I guess adding to that, if I'm looking through a CV or talking to a candidate, what I want to sort of see evidence of is real life challenges that they've been solving. What problems have they solved in the real world? When I do look at education, it tends to be more on the basis of if somebody's actually moving to Berlin. Are they from outside of the EU? Do they need a visa? That's when sometimes education is very important to look at, because it's a lot harder to come and legally work without a relevant degree that has been completed. I've seen cases where people have gone through a recruitment process and they might have listed a course on their CV, but actually if if that course had not been completed, then you get to the end of that process and all of a sudden the German government won't issue a blue card, which is very awkward. So, so I guess education from that point of view is very important. But if you already live locally or sort of in the proximity or in Europe even, then it's not so much. It's more about what you've done in the real world, I'd say.
Okay, thank you for your answers. And the next question would be about showing your potential. So the question is, one of the best ways to show potential is presenting the personal projects the right way. Any tips on this? Like focusing on the thought process behind it, or what is the best way to showcase or present your personal projects? Any do's and don'ts to pass the application state or resume review and actually land an interview? I have seen many junior job openings that have unrealistic requirements. Should one avoid applying to any employer that asks that much from the get-go?
Sorry,
yeah. You go ahead.
Go, Steve.
Thank you. I was just going to say, from a recruitment point of view, it's not uncommon to see somebody write a job description which is effectively a shopping list of all these amazing technical skills, and you should have had experience in this tool and this tool and this tool, 5 years experience in this tool, but actually that tool's only been out for 2 years. That's not, and that's just sometimes a lack of experience writing job descriptions. People who write these sometimes aren't content writers, and they need practice at it. So don't let that put you off. Never do you hire somebody who ticks every single box of each requirement on a job description or an advert. So what we're looking for is elements that they could bring. Of course, you need to tick some of them. Otherwise, you're not going to get past the first stages. But yeah, don't let it put you off.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and it's also very old-fashioned to say it's from the old ways. You know, we're a company. Why should we hire you? And you have to do A and B and C. And when you're here, I will give you orders to do D and E and F, and you will execute all my orders. You know, this is not the world we are living in. So, I agree with Steve. Sometimes people still write shopping lists. That's lack of time, lack of experience. Don't get it in the way. What you're looking for is land the first interview with a hiring manager or with the first people from the team, getting past the recruiter. You want that. You want that first call with the recruiter and having the conversation. And from that moment on, job description does not matter anymore. The way I use job description is they tell you a story. If you read, you know, don't look at the skill set, look everywhere else. You would find what challenges that team is having. You know, sometimes they are underlining something, you know, 10 years of database experience, probably they have a big problem about databases. You know, it's not about that 10 years. So try to see between the lines what's going on. And you would see also the things they're proud of, you know, excellent, profound framework and something. And you say, oh, these guys are going big in that language stack. So you can gain, actually, you know, you can go prepared to this interview. And
so what about presenting the projects that you did, the personal projects?
Yeah, that
what
was
is the best way to do that?
So juniors, so as a hiring managers, the CV cannot be too long. If you're a junior, it's max 2 pages. Your project's 1 page. In total, you're looking at 3 pages. And if a hiring manager reads everything line by line, half an hour before the interview, you know, there are exceptions to that, but you just assume that's the case. You know, just be mindful about it. And we would not look at the project itself. We would look at, you know, what does this project say to me? Is it about, you know, something she's passionate about, or is it about a specific technology that person wants to underline? So have a message with that content, and ultimately that point might land with the engineering manager.
Yeah.
tech people would not look at this project list, I'm telling you. Engineering manager would look at it.
Okay, there are a couple of questions about internships. And because some people apply for internships rather than junior positions as their first entry into the tech world. So what are the differences between hiring an intern and hiring a junior software developer from your point of view, from your expectations, or would the process differ? Are there different standards for hiring an intern and a junior engineer?
Oh, it changes a lot from company to company. For example, the company I work in, there is more a tendency to hire junior people, but there is no such internship concept. In the other more European German companies I work, internship is like a lightweight thing. You get paid less, the expectations are less. They take you in, they give you all kinds of jobs, and then you will get more and more interesting and challenging jobs as you go. But the first incentive is also to get the bulk of the work done. You might be doing manual stuff. You might be, 60%, let's say, boring stuff, and 40% working with the team. And over time, they would say, wow, you brought value. We see something in you. We might now turn you into a junior position. Usually you don't land a professional position immediately. So I see it even like a pre-junior stage in most of the companies.
Mm-hmm. So what are you looking for in an intern when they apply? When you want to hire an intern, what are you looking for in an intern? Is it any different than what you have described for your requirements from a junior position?
Yeah, the junior position, for me personally, comes with a lot of expectation. That person does not have experience, years of experience, or maybe, let me give you an example. One of my best friends, we studied computer science together, and he had a master's and he almost made a PhD. He stayed in that world long, and then he said, I'm done with this. I just want to go out and become a Java programmer. And we are the same age. And with the age of 36 or so, he started working as a Java programmer, but he had the excellent knowledge of computer science. So there are people like this. So it could be anything else. Junior people are, for me, they can come, they will get the challenge and coaching, and in a year they are in the professional team if you do the job well. Interns are not like that. Interns could be young people still studying, and maybe they are still navigating through jobs. Sometimes they come for a programming internship and then they land at UX jobs. So these are people, for me, a little bit having more questions, and they are not very opinionated about pursuing a software development job. But that might be my very personal perception of that.
And for you, Steve?
I think with interns, it's more of an education, and you just happen to be having that education on the job. So, of course, after education, there's no guarantee. If you're at a university, there's no guarantee that you're going to step out of that university and the next day you're going to land a job. And it's the same with internships. So I think it gives you a platform to demonstrate your abilities and your potential and your enthusiasm to hopefully impress the right people around you, for them to then want to convert after that internship program ends in 6 months, whatever it might be, for them to turn around and say, do you know what, that person did create value, they were infectious, they had a thirst for learning. Instead of going out to the wider market and trying to find my next junior engineer, I've got one right here who I'm going to convert. And it gives you, it's almost kind of like a trial. Think of it as a trial to that next job. And yeah, that's why I think internships could add real value to businesses. These are more common in bigger organizations, of course, because it's important, if you're taking on interns, you have this infrastructure in place. And what I mean by that is the personnel in place to support those interns. There would be nothing worse than taking on a bunch of interns and then sort of not giving them the proper support to flourish. Complete waste of time for everybody if that happens.
So from your experience, does it get easier to find a job after a few years of experience in the field?
For me, yes, certainly. Once you build that experience up, and just going back to sort of doing an internship, if I'd seen somebody who had maybe done 6 months at Wayfair, and they were applying for a junior position, or somebody who didn't yet have that experience, then of course, for me, I'm going to want to talk to that person who's done the 6-month internship first, because they've just been in the real world, and that's so important, is understanding how the real world operates. Like, you don't have to have all the technical skills or knowledge. Nobody has everything behind their belt. Certainly, I sort of a very sort of early stage in their career, but if you've been in and around teams, understand how they operate, how they collaborate together, how they work in an agile setting, what stand-ups mean, what retrospectives mean, what sprints are. If they just immerse themselves in that world, then it feels natural to them when they go into that world for real next time. So yeah, that's where it adds real value, I'd say, and that's what I would look for when I'm discussing.
Okay, before we wrap up, I have one final question, and it's about changing careers. So the question is, how is your view about career changes, often older with lots of experience in other fields and coming to IT and tech roles? How does this balance?
I could give an example of somebody who I recently hired, that they've not changed industries or sort of that they've already been in tech and engineering. So this lady, she was a very skilled QA automation engineer, senior end. When I spoke to her about a job, we were hiring for people exactly like her. She looked like a great fit. I reached out to her and said, do you fancy a chat? And when I got talking to her, what suddenly came out of that conversation was she had this underlying passion for JavaScript and front-end technologies. And she was studying this in her own time. She was getting really close to the front-end engineers in the current company that she was. She had put herself through like a boot camp sort of school scenario. But for her, she was under that sort of that dilemma of, right, well, I'm at the senior level for QA, but actually, how do I now transition into becoming a front-end engineer? So she made that conscious decision that, okay, right, I can't justify a salary that I'm getting now as a senior when I come in as a front-end person, and I'm going to contribute less from day one. So she compromised on what she wanted to earn, and she was very sensible about what her market rate was. She did some good research and talked to the friends who performed this role, and she ultimately sort of made the decision, no, I'm going to say no to the QA role, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to take one step back in terms of earnings, but actually I'm looking at the bigger picture. I'm going to take 2, 3, 4 steps forward and actually do something that I'm incredibly passionate about. And for her, that was her motivator to do that.
Yeah, it is definitely possible. It might not be easy, and it depends where you're coming from and where you're going to. So if you have been in another industry profession and you're going to front-end engineering, that's definitely not easy possible. If your aspiration is becoming a data scientist, is also possible, but it's a little bit harder. So everything is possible at the end of the day. And the important thing is getting into the environment, getting into the context where you have the opportunity to work on these topics and getting paid for it. And probably during the first months and years, it will be more of a compromise, you learning and ramping up and getting to a situation where you can, just be equals with your peers. Mm-hmm. Definitely an investment.
I also think moving careers, maybe you're a little bit older. and you've been in a career for 10, 20 years and you've just fallen out of love with that profession. You want to try something new. Programming has been a hobby. You want to make it a full-time career. I think moving across and doing that is a positive move, but it's a case of sort of balancing out what your situation is at home. Can you afford to do that? And just having sort of honest conversations. I think if you've been in a different industry, there'll be a lot of, like, a different profession, sorry, there'll be a lot of transferable skills that you probably don't realize you've got, which could add real great value to a team that you could potentially join, much more so than maybe somebody who is really junior straight out of college. So don't think that you don't have anything to give. You've got all these life experiences that can translate into something. And remember, engineers aren't robots; they're people. And as we said earlier in this webinar, people want to work with people, and we're not. Engineers aren't a bunch of robots. So you've got some really interesting life experiences you could bring in and share, I'm sure, and make a difference, add some value.
Thank you. That was it. That was the wrap up for our question and answer section. We are over time by half an hour. I think this kind of shows how terrible we are at estimation.
Don't estimate is the answer.
As the industry, we are terrible at estimation. So thank you very, very much, Füsun and Steve, for being with us today. This was an amazing hour and a half for me, and I hope that's the case for our attendees as well. I learned a lot today from your experiences, looking into hiring, looking into interviewing, and I hope, we left at least some bits and pieces of information and advice for our attendees to apply to their careers when they're job hunting. And I know it's really difficult to job hunt. It's a psychological, stressful period, and it only ends when you land that final job. So please bear with the process. Please bear with you. Never give up hope. Always apply to the next company and the next company. Rejections are not personal. And even if you get rejected, the same CV will probably land a job at maybe even a better company. So never stop looking for your perfect job. And in fact, here's a spoiler. This is what I tell all my team members. Never stop looking for a job, even when you are employed. The worst case scenario is you're going to understand the value of your current team and your current company. You're going to say, I'm very lucky to be at this company right now. And the best case scenario is you're going to find your dream job. So never stop job hunting. And with that, I'm going to switch to my screen. Hopefully that will work. Yes. And again, I thank you so much for being with us today. And this webinar was brought to you from Coyotiv. And Coyotiv is a new School of Software Engineering. I'm Arman. If I didn't introduce myself, that was probably because I was very excited at the very beginning. I'm Arman. I'm the founder and lead instructor at Coyotiv. And what we do is we prepare you as a first-class software engineer, starting your career, kickstarting your career in web application development. So thank you for being with us today, and hope to see you soon. Take care.
Bye, Arman. Bye, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.